truly enjoy 911, and I truly enjoy your character and the many layers that you bring to the character. One of the things that was really interesting to me was the episode where we learn about the backstory of you having a younger brother. And that kind of would answer why you may have a hero complex of saving other people and becoming a firefighter. My question is, does that also explain kind of
Right as you got to the question, I lost your sound again. It was literally the last sentence. I was with you the whole way.
One second.
Oh, there you are.
There I am. Sorry. I was saying that with the hero complex that we've seen through the explanation of the younger brother and the parents, would that also explain some of Buck's dating habits?
I think so. Absolutely. I think when you have a traumatic experience like that, even though it wasn't one that he was necessarily aware of at the time, he was still dealing with the implications of it. One of which being that he never really felt wanted by his parents. So I think one of the ways that can then express itself as he, becomes an adult is that he was always craving this feeling of being wanted, because it's not a thing that he got to experience as a child. So I absolutely think that that particular aspect of his childhood is coming out in the ways that he pursues women and goes about his dating.
Kind of broke it off with Taylor and he put it into a relationship. Usually it's the other way around. So I was wondering, with the opportunity of probably being single, will he stay single for long and kind of do a self-discovery, or is there more love?
No, I think that's exactly it. I think, as we move into the 6th season, it's a time of self-discovery for him and self-exploration. He's putting his focus and his energy much more, I think, at the moment into his work, and seeing how far he can progress as a firefighter, whether that be through promotions or just being the best firefighter he can be. I don't think he's closed off to love by any means, but I do think that he's at a point where he understands there's some work that he has to do on himself, so that he can then maybe go and, when the time is right, be the best partner to somebody that he can be.
Right. Now, Eddie and also Christopher, they're very close to Buck. I would say that you're like a second father to Christopher as well. How has they shaped your relationship, more like your growth, especially with season 6?
Yeah, I think it's, their relationship has grown over the seasons, and it's certainly something that has helped see Buck mature. I think one of the things that has been a running theme of Buck is that it is through the people in his life that he has been able to make these kind of steps forward. Starting way back in season 1 when he first got with Abbey, I think that was his first big step. And then, Eddie and Christopher have been huge in his development. I think just by showing him another side of himself and allowing him to kind of, as you say, step into that, borderline co-parenting role, and kind of embrace that and take on that responsibility, as it were, something that he hasn't had a chance to do before. I think one of the things moving into season 6, and you're right that will absolutely continue, but is that Buck also needs to learn to take steps and make these strides forward for himself, rather than always doing it through other people. So they're always going to be an important part of his journey, but I think it is also important that he learns to do it for and by himself.
Kind of speaking of Abbey a little bit, we kind of had that phone call. It felt like a closure moment. How would you interpret that for Buck?
Yeah, I think that is certainly a closed chapter. Something that will have always been an important part of his life and his development, but something that is happy to be left in the past.
With season 6, we got the trailer kind of shows that we're having a big accident at, I believe, the Cal Air Stadium, involving a soccer game and a blimp. Can you tease kind of what we can expect from that?
Yeah, it's not the same kind of disaster that we've dealt with in previous seasons that spans 2 or 3 episodes. It is big and it is in the premiere and it does take up a lot of time, but it it's not like something that where the repercussions extend over a number of episodes. It's just, I think, a big chaotic 911 way to reintroduce the characters again and see them doing what it is that they do best, running into the fire, running into the danger, and putting themselves on the line to help usually, a couple of strangers, but in this particular case, thousands and thousands of people.
Is there a particular like big episode where they had a huge accident that you was like really excited to film?
So the blimp in episode 1 is a big one, and then in episode 2 as well, we find the 118 going to a happiness convention, which I didn't know this was a thing, but I tell you, it was a really lovely thing to get to be around. Everything was bright colored and smiley faces everywhere. It was a really nice experience, but there's a real kind of epic catastrophe that happens there, and that was a really big one in the sense of just the scale of the actual emergency, but then also the kind of way it affects each one of our characters. So it's big in multiple ways, which I always think is a really lovely thing when 911 teaches the characters something about themselves through the emergency calls that they go on.
Seems that there may be a little bit of a Buck being involved in a car accident. We saw in the trailer, we don't really know. Can you tease maybe certain situations that you'll be in that are dangerous?
Sure, yeah. Buck is always going to be the firefighter who runs a little bit too fast into situations, and that has worked out well for him in the past, and then not so well. So I don't think that's ever something that is going to be completely lost from the character. That is at his core who he is, and so sometimes the typical Buck being Buck, as some of the characters have put to him, happens a little bit too fast, and there's no thought, and he ends up in a line of danger. And yes, one of those is to do with a car hurtling towards him, which is a scary prospect.
Okay. All right. There seems to be different pairings for this season where we had previous seasons before. Can you tease maybe different people that you'll be working with, either guest stars or even just the cast itself that you didn't get the chance to really work with before?
Yeah, I mean, one of the themes I will say actually going into this season is the 118 is kind of reunited as a whole again. A lot of season 5 was broken up for various reasons, whether it be Chimney off searching for Maddie or Eddie out on leave. So the kind of theme actually at the beginning of season 6 is this kind of reunion and of everybody coming back together. However, the end of season 5 also played into Bobby and Athena heading off on a honeymoon, which of course leaves a captain's role vacant. So there's some fun stuff that plays out off the back of that, and yes, different pairings and shaking up. But one of the strengths I think of 911 is that you can always put these people with different partners, and it always works because those relationships have been built to such a strong degree where you can have Buck and Eddie, but then you can also have Buck and Hen, you can have Buck and Chimney, you can have Chimney and Eddie. Like it just works kind of whichever combination you stick together, which I think has always been a real strength of the show.
One of the things that I was really interested in knowing, what is Buck's opinion about what really happened between Maddie and Chimney?
I think we touched on it a little bit in season 5, where he obviously wanted to push them back together. He loves them both, Maddie being his sister and Chimney being one of his best friends and colleagues. But I think, and this in itself, I believe, is a moment of growth. He's also realizing that it's not necessarily his problem to fix, and that his meddling may in fact make it worse. So I truly believe he wants them to fix things up, and be a loving partnership and couple and parental figure, parental unit for Ji-yoon. But I think he understands as well that he has to let it happen, and he just wants to sit back and let their love re-blossom.
Okay, I like that. Still at heart. So I really like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One of the things I was wondering, what would Buck's perfect day be?
Interesting. I think he's an early riser. I think, we've played into kind of his athleticism before. So I think he's going to probably go to the gym and get that out of the way. I think that's a thing that probably fuels some of his confidence. You know, it's maybe a cop-out to say this, but in many respects, I think his perfect day is going to work. You know, I think that is one of the things you've come to learn about him is so much of his identity is tied to what he does for a living. And obviously his closest relationships are those people that he works with. So I think his perfect day probably involves being strung up on the side of a building in some heart-pounding, adrenaline-fueled moment where he gets to save a life. And I think that's truly where he feels his best and his favorite self.
Wonderful. I loved it. I loved everything of the journey so far. So thank you so much for speaking to me. I hope you make it through with that car incident. I don't know what's going on. I'm scared.
Me too.
So thank you once again for speaking with me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good day.